Great, thanks, Colin. It's my pleasure to be in front of you as chair, and hopefully I can shed some further light on the National Unification Framework, which was published, I believe, about a month ago. So I'm here just to add a little bit more color and again provide a bit more clarity, and I'm sure there will be some questions, especially around the certification process. So I'll do my best in terms of just expanding on what you've already read so far. So first of all, the need for the National Unification Framework. There's definitely a high need for that, just given the complexity as Bob was talking about in the journey to get to this stage. The National Unification Framework and principles are heavily influenced by a position paper put out in May of last year when these talks started, and it provided a common framework for the development of provincial merger proposals. So everything seems to have fallen into place in terms of these principles that I'll just be going over very shortly. So during the consultation process, one of the things that was brought up was the whole certification process, the CPA pre-certification education system, and so on and so forth. So those are real valid information that was quite necessary in terms of getting to this stage, and therefore it was published along the same time as the unification framework itself. So if we just go to the 8 principles, the guiding principles. So I'll just go through these one by one again. Like I said, without the risk of repeating what's already on the document itself, I'll just expand on it as best as I can. So again, the first principle is the key one, which is really describing the evolution to a single designation, the Chartered Professional Accountant, or CPA. So once provincial legislation is passed, all current members in good standing would be granted a CPA. However, for a period of 10 years, members using the new CPA designation would be required to tag or use it in conjunction with their existing designation. Once a tagging period ends, a member could choose to use a CPA on its own or continue to use it with their legacy designation. Again, subjective to legislative approval. So that's the key in all of this. Number 2, second principle, is the members would continue to use their existing designations, and no one would be granted a designation from another professional body. Third, the unification framework would protect all existing rights of members, such as public accounting, licensing rights, or rights under existing mutual recognition agreements, without granting new rights. And the CPA body would negotiate new mutual recognition agreements. It's also important to note that any member not authorized to practice in a restricted area such as audit prior to the merger would be required to complete any necessary provincial programs to qualify post-merger. Makes sense. Fourth principle, what would we have heard loud and clear from our members is the need to maintain our rigorous education standards. And again, we'll go through that during as I go over the certification process. Number 5, specialties. We expect that, like other professions such as medicine or law, post-designation specialty programs would be developed. So areas such as tax, forensic accounting, strategic management, and public sector accounting would further be considered. Number 6, early in the transition process, a new CPA organization will focus branding efforts on the CPA designation, and there would be no longer any branding of the legacy designations. Number 7 is a key one because it's one of the how do you say it, the foundational principles, in the sense of it addresses the need for and value in creating a uniform regulatory regime for Canada's professional accountants. While there may be some differences across jurisdictions, if the legislation is similar from province to province, it will be simple. It will simplify things for those who practice multi-jurisdictionally. In addition, a new common regulatory framework reflecting the best practices of the existing organizations, including codes of conduct, practice inspection, disciplinary processes, and an effective nationally consistent public accounting regime would be developed. As part of a recommendation to government, we would also ask that the new CPA designation establish a common regulatory regime for all accountants, including those who are undesignated. The new CPA organization would also be responsible for standard setting in the profession. So that's a long-winded way of saying we're going to create some efficiencies in the legislative process and the governing process. Finally, there would be merged operations and governance at the provincial and national levels, again talking to the efficiencies of the merger itself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the CPA certification process. It's important to note that at the current stage, the work that's gone into it is when I first heard it, and was presented by Peter Norwood. Some of you know Peter Norwood. He had presented to us, and it was quite comprehensive given the stage that we're at. But having said that, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, and again, at the end of the presentation, we hope to address as many of those as best we can, given the stage that we're at. So what is the vision of the CPA certification model? Basically, it's to create a comprehensive, relevant to all skill sets, so try and encompass as much as we can in terms of making the delivery of a preeminent professional accounting designation and an internationally recognized business credential. A new CPA competency map would be designed to meet the needs of industry, government, and public practice. This document would cover both technical competencies, advanced financial accounting and reporting, management accounting, taxation, financial and performance management, and others, as well as enabling competencies such as professionalism, leadership, and problem solving. So as you can see, it's a fairly comprehensive set of skill sets that we would be included in this certification model, and certainly those that we've grown to love and embrace and learn and everything else in our CMA would be included in that and wouldn't be forgotten. The elements of the CPA certification. The proposed CPA certification program draws on the strengths of the existing programs and would be recognized by members, regulators, global accounting organizations, and the business community as being at least as rigorous as all existing programs. An undergraduate degree in specific prerequisite courses in business and accountancy would be required for admission to the professional education program. So again, there's criteria that's being spoken about early on. The professional education program would include a series of modules focused on enhancing candidates' ability to apply professional knowledge, professional values, ethics, and attitudes in a professional context. The certification process would also include a comprehensive and multi-day final exam and rigorous practical experience. Practical experience would also be a key component, with a requirement of 3 years practical experience, consisting of postgraduate professional education program with strong elements of practical application and 24 months of field experience. The timing of all of this, the new CPA certification modules will be ready to launch in fall of 2013, and the first CPA final exam will be written in 2015. So that's a rough guideline in terms of when this would play out as far as the major milestones. So in summary, the CPA certification program will be at least as rigorous as the current programs. That's certainly a concern for all parties involved, so that's being addressed. It'll meet or exceed all IFAC standards for education, assessment, and practical experience. Appeal to employers for its development of accountancy and business skills, again relevant to public interest. Meet or exceed requirements for existing and future mutual recognition agreements. Be nationally developed in structure and content and regionally delivered. We'll also be developing an alternate program that will be bridgeable to the CPA designation to meet the diverse needs of both employers and clients. This program would be developed for those who aspire to a career in accountancy, but not as a qualified CPA. So this is certainly an option that's been discussed, and it's quite a reality. So this program would have a distinct entrance, education, and assessment requirements. A bridging program to the appropriate stage of the CPA certification program would be developed. Now again, as you can see, there's a lot of details that would be involved in this, but again, the framework for that is currently at play. So that's hopefully adds a little bit more color to what you have seen posted on the website, as well as that was delivered to you about a month ago. So I'm going to pass it back to Colin, and Colin's going to talk a little bit about the BC merger proposal.
Thank you, Steve. So again, most of you, I hope, have had a chance to read through the documents that you received, but I'm going to go through some of them, not in great detail, but there is enough information there that we want to cover quite a bit of it. The BC provincial merger proposal was developed and endorsed by the leadership of the CMA, and CJ Council and boards in BC, and we are taking it to our membership and other relevant stakeholders for their consideration. That's part of this consultation process. The proposal is consistent with the National Unification Framework, and it includes information on governance, integrating the operations, transition, and the benefits to members. Next one. Under the heading of governance, BC's new CPA profession after a transition period would be governed by a volunteer board made up of 15 elected CPAs and public reps appointed by the government. Terms of office would be 3 years, renewable for a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. Exceptions to this term limit would be made for individuals appointed to the executive committee, and the chair of the board would be elected by and from among the board directors for a 1-year term, and the executive committee would consist of board directors appointed annually by the board. The first board of directors would be formed once BC CPA legislation is enacted. To ensure continuity within the new profession, new board members would be appointed from members sitting at that time on the CMA board, the CA Council, and the CGA board. The composition would be proportionate to the number of members in each of the legacy bodies, appointed by the existing board councils of the respective organizations. As follows: CMAs, therefore in British Columbia, based on our current mix of membership numbers, CMA would have 3 positions, CA 6 and CGA 6. If you go across the country, this varies quite a bit. CGAs are the second biggest body in Canada in BC. That isn't the case for the CMAs or the CAs. And I've said this before, but if you go to Alberta, the CMAs are quite a bit bigger than the CGAs. If you go to Saskatchewan, the CMAs are 5 times as big as the CGAs. So the proportional representation on provincial boards would vary. Over time, interim board members would be replaced with elected CPA members regardless of their legacy designations at that time. The first board election would be held after the 2nd anniversary of the new legislation taking effect, and 1/3 of appointed board positions, that is 1 CPA CMA, 2 CPA CA, and 2 CPA CGAs, would be up for election in that and each of the following 2 years. Next one. Under operations, management of the CPA organization would reflect and take into account the best accepted practices, processes, and management structure of the current 3 bodies. The creation and operation of the CPA organization would require experienced and talented employees to maintain continuity. Successful unification would initially require utilizing the existing staff of the 3 legacy organizations and individuals whose education, experience, and qualifications best match the requirements would be appointed to the respective positions. Members in each accountancy body are charged dues each year under the heading of dues now. National fees differ quite a bit between the 3 bodies, but in British Columbia, the British Columbia portion of the dues are very close. So the plan is that efforts would be made to equalize the fees of CPA members over a 5-year transition period. Many of these are concepts. We're balancing the amount of work that the work groups are working on because we don't want to spend too much staff time working out endless details when we're within 60 to 90 days of having a much better idea of whether the merger's a go or no go in this province. So we're moving along, but we don't want to delve into huge details quite yet. There is going to be quite a long transition period. If a commitment to proceed with legislation is received from the government, the 3 bodies will work with the government officials to draft legislation to be included in the legislative calendar at the earliest opportunity. Currently, the BC government's telling us that once they agreed to this, it would take up to 3 years to get the legislation changed. With the political climate in British Columbia, we don't know if that'll affect the 3 years or not. Could be shorter. Doubt that it would take longer than that. In addition, the CMA BC, ICA BC, and CGA BC will commence planning and implementing the integration of their respective organizations during this transition period. The existing levels of member services are expected to be maintained or even expanded during the transition phase. To the extent possible, members of each legacy body would be granted access to the member services of the other body on equal terms. Until provincial CPA legislation is passed, members would continue to follow the bylaws, regulations, and rules of their current legacy body and the current regulatory processes of each body would be maintained. Once provincial legislation is in place, current members would be granted the CPA designation. Members will use the CPA designation in conjunction with their existing designation for 10 years, after which time it would be optional to include the legacy designation in addition to the CPA designation. The plan is that once we know it's a go, we would stop branding CMA, CA, or CGA and start branding CPA only. So after 10 years, the thinking is that most members will probably focus just on the CPA. Consideration will be given to developing a reasonable transition period for implementation, including specific guidance to members in public practice. Next one. There's a lot of benefits to members that you could surmise from some of the overview, but we just pointed out a couple of things here. To be better positioned to protect the public by ensuring all professional accounting and assurance services meet a uniformly high and consistent level of ethical and practice standards, and also, as was mentioned earlier, a consistent code of conduct. To protect and enhance the value of your designation in an increasingly competitive international environment. To contribute to the sustainability and prosperity of the Canadian accounting profession, and to govern the accounting profession in a more efficient and effective manner. Next one. So part of this consultation process is to hear your viewpoints, and we want to hear the viewpoints of others. So a key task for our society is engaging the members and other key stakeholders regarding not only the National Unification Framework and BC merger proposal. What we really want is to gauge the level of support that there is. While our members' views are important, they are not the only views we have to consider. Our board will also talk to financial regulators, business leaders, consumers, and educators. We will collect and assess the input received during the consultation from key stakeholders, as well as assess the support for the merger in jurisdictions across Canada. Every question asked at these sessions, as well as those received by email or telephone, will be noted and provided in a report to your BC board. No merger in BC will be enacted without the approval of the BC government. Our sense is that the government wants to know not only how our members feel about the proposal here in BC and the members of all three bodies, but also how the proposal is proceeding on a national basis. Therefore, once consultation is ended, we will consider this feedback and draft a formal submission to the BC government regarding the merger of the three accounting bodies. And the final submission to the government will reflect and include the response from members. We currently, and we hope it's not optimistic, we currently anticipate we might be at that stage this May. The current thinking is the consultation phase, such as these town halls, which all three bodies are holding, will take place during the month of February and March. Some of them are scheduled out into late March. The CAs have added some of the CA medium and large firms, as well as some companies where they have a lot of CAs. So their town halls aren't just based on their membership. They're getting requests from some of the big employers to come in. And they've added a few of those near the end of March. Then April would plan to be a sort of a gathering together of all the feedback that's being received. And the three bodies will then get together, see where we are, and if it looks like it's a go, then we'll start working on the presentation to the BC government. And in between there, each of the boards and the CA Council will have to approve it as well. So a closing thought. I thought I would include a wrap-up with what I think is a relevant quotation. I don't know if any of you have seen this before. It's a bit of a paraphrase of a longer quotation, but I'll read it anyway. There is an urgent need to improve the working relationship of the three major accounting bodies in Canada. We feel the accelerating competition among the major accounting bodies, the increasing duplication of programs and services, and the resulting inefficiencies in the use of resources are detrimental to the future of the profession in Canada and to the needs of its members. We feel it is urgent and important for the bodies in Canada to begin a dialogue on ways and means to rationalize the profession. Next one. The three accounting bodies in Canada are not doing an adequate job of serving the interests of the public or the profession. All three tend to deal with the issues from the perspective of their own narrow self-interest, rather than looking at the accounting profession as a whole or how our profession can best serve the needs of the public at large. The time to start is now. When was this said and by whom? It was said by the then president of our society in 1969. And that tells you how long there's been a need for rationalization, and we're no further ahead today. In fact, I would suggest we're further behind because there's less clarity of differences between the designations now than there was even then. But I think this was obviously a pretty bright guy, I think. I hope after attending this presentation it's clear to you that our profession is at a crossroads. It's vitally important that all our members help us develop appropriate input to government to help it do the right thing for the profession. So again, as being said, if you have any questions, we would like to provide we want you to provide your feedback to the Society. And now, after our presentation, we'll open it up to Q&A.